This episode of the podcast is brought to you by New Bloom Labs.
New Bloom Labs continues to position itself at the cutting edge of cannabis science. New Bloom Labs is leading the industry in potency testing of Delta 8, Delta 9, 2 isomers of Delta 10, and a dozen other major and minor cannabinoids that are shaping the industry. They offer the fastest turnaround time in the industry as well, by delivering most test results in just one business day. If you're a cannabis producer that's creating innovative products with multiple cannabinoids, you need the best, most comprehensive potency analysis there is, and New Bloom Labs will deliver the most precise analysis of your cannabis product and show you the raw chromatography to back it up. That's why you need to call New Bloom Labs at 844-TEST-CBD or visit their website at newbloomlabs.com. Superior science, rapid results, New Bloom Labs. Hello, my fellow people of the plant. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast, your favorite podcast that includes industry-facing conversations with the industry's leading experts that aim to educate and inform the public regarding the plant's endless benefits. My guest today is Zachary Pitts. He's the CEO at Ganja Goddess. Zachary Pitts, thanks for making time for us today on this Friday, man.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, yes. I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you today. Specifically about the delivery market, which Ganja Goddess, of course, plays in, as well as the dispensary side. But I understand that you have like over 10 years of experience in the cannabis industry. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what kind of hats you've wore within the space and the roles in which you've held in this industry.
We definitely started off very scrappy. I think anyone who has been in the industry for a long time, they've been through the ringer in some ways. They have a lot of. I think when you I started working in cannabis I did a little bit in like 2006, 2007, but really I started working in 2008. I think there's just a certain level of risk tolerance you needed to have at that time because it was a little bit of a wild west, and not in the sense of like, things were crazy, but just like, no one really knew exactly what the rules were because the state didn't want to, in California, the state didn't want to define the rules. They kind of took a hands-off approach, and a lot of the cities had kind of like disjointed rules. A lot of them didn't quite work really well, or they, would still, like in LA, for instance, technically all the medical dispensaries were considered illegal, but they just had exemptions from prosecution so they weren't actually licensed or anything like that. But anyway, so I started off growing and I started off making edibles. It was kind of my partner, she had gotten into growing an edible manufacturer just for her friends. And she brought me on to help her. And it just kept growing and growing. And we got more and more business that way. And then in 2011, we decided, why don't we kept getting requests to like ship the products to people, or to, random places throughout California. People would contact us and say, hey, I really love your brownies or gingerbread. We made mostly baked goods. But they'd be in Santa Barbara, or they'd be in the Central Valley,
Right.
or in the Bay Area. And we at the time we were based in Los Angeles. And so we decided to do a delivery service that would ship across the state, that would kind of cover most of California. And we do next day delivery. And we wanted to try to make it an e-commerce site, something that's familiar for people who have ordered online, but it is really easy to use. And to kind of step back a moment, my partner is an older woman. Not that old, but her experience, she really enjoyed taking cannabis, both personally for the pleasure she got out of it, but also for medically, for she had a problem with one of her knees, and she had a lot of friends who had medical interests. And she was finding when she'd go to the medical shops, uh, a, she just didn't enjoy the experience. It was very oriented towards young men, towards that kind of like pot bro attitude, which is not bad. That is just part of our culture.
Right.
But there was nothing that made her feel part of it. There
I
was
could
nothing that made
I would
her accept.
imagine it. I would imagine it could be overwhelming, also, right? For someone who's older, and this being such a new industry for every consumer, right, from every demographic, especially the older group. Like, it's kind of intimidating to probably walk into a
Yeah,
dispensary when they've seen for so long that this plant has been illegal, right, and deemed Schedule 1 narcotic. So
yeah,
um, that definitely has to be part of it. Yeah.
yeah. I don't know if for her, I don't know if it was so much intimidating as just she felt sketched out by it. She
Right.
just, there'd be like huge security guards because at the time you couldn't really, if you needed to call the cops, they just come and like take all of your stuff. Even if you were legal and following all the rules, it was just a problem to rely on the police for normal criminal matters. So you had to have tons of security. They'd have like all these metal bars and like buzz through gates and all that kind of stuff. So it was like walking into a prison almost. And just be a bunch of guys who would kind of dismiss her because she was a woman as well. And so a lot of our identity that we've made a core of our business was about kind of like bringing in those people who are interested in cannabis, but the traditional market, the traditional cannabis culture wasn't really giving a path for them to learn and experience it in the way that they would want it to, or they want to. I should say present tense as well. Um, and so that kind of really drove how we operated. Everyone who's been in cannabis for a long time, though, we've had those experiences with medical. We've had the experiences with how like cannabis can truly change lives for the better. Um, but we really tried to focus on like how can we educate people about how this can improve your life, how this can make you, anything from like anxiety and sleep to like serious medical conditions. And yeah, I feel like we really captured that, and we had a lot of success with that, with reaching customers. We have customers that are still with us that started um, buying from us back in 2011 and 2012.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, and it's good that y'all add that education factor to it, right? Because while you mentioned, and it's true, during that early times, 2008, and even before that, like walking into a medical dispensary could be like we said, like it could either be shady, it could be intimidating, but the benefit of going in is getting that education from bud tenders that know what they're talking about, right? So the
yeah,
fact that y'all kind of, make sure that that's incorporated in your delivery services, because that's important, right? Again, this is so new that we're still just scratching the surface when it comes to the efficacy of these cannabinoids.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, 100%.
yeah. So that makes sense, right? The comfortability level of someone going into a dispensary, not being used to the traditional cannabis culture. So let's talk about trends within this booming world of cannabis delivery, because we've obviously seen a spike in consumer adoption of cannabis during the pandemic, right? More people are inside, they're locked at home. So what trends have you seen, let's say, even before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and kind of now what we're seeing play out in 2021?
Sure. So from our research, I know that pre-pandemic, about 15% of the California population was using somewhat regularly or intermittently at least cannabis. And once the pandemic happened, people's attitude, as you mentioned, it shifted. It ticked up a little bit, usage ticked up a little bit, but I think what really happened was just more people were trying it and more people were using cannabis instead of alcohol as well. Um, it's the perfect drug to use when you want to hang out inside and uh, you're not seeing that many people. Maybe you're just watching some Netflix or something like that. And so and it doesn't it doesn't have as many negative side effects as alcohol does. If you don't wake up the next morning hungover. Um, and so and then on top of that, everyone's just so anxious over this pandemic. Everyone is having so much trouble sleeping. It just it just changed consumer attitudes, I think, a lot. Um, Sorry.
And you, I know that y'all like commissioned a poll, didn't you, recently, that obviously cited the double-digit increase in cannabis consumption, but they cited the reasons in which they were using was to treat, like you said, sleep, anxiety,
Yeah,
depression, things like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked to our customers. Unfortunately, I don't have the statistics in front of me. The last time we chatted, we kind of had a little poll was back in like August or September. But basically, we had found that people had been moving over to cannabis more from alcohol. People were kind of self-medicating, and that's a really interesting part of cannabis, is that it has the medical origins, in at least in the fight for legality. um, but so many people use it medically that aren't official medical users. It takes a couple hoops to jump through to get that medical certification. But it's one of those things that you can have fun with it, you can play around with it, but also it can really it can really help with anxiety. It can really help with sleep. It can really help with, like, minor aches and pains. If you twist your ankle or you have a little bit of arthritis. So there's small things that people use it for without really kind of like identifying or self-designating as a medical user. And we saw a big increase in that over the pandemic.
Right. And just to kind of go back, because you touched on your business partner and how, she's a regular consumer and user of cannabis for, different joint pain and other things. So like, how about you, Zachary? Like, what's your experience with the plant? I mean, even before getting into the space, like, were you a user? Were you an advocate? Like, what's your background there?
I wasn't a huge, I wasn't smoking every day. I would use it recreationally, pretty much intermittently when my friends did. Um, and I started using a lot later in life. I was 18 years old before the first time that I got high, whereas most of my friends in the industry or peers, I feel like they started when they were very young. And obviously, I have kids now. I try to talk with them about cannabis, be very open about, like, sometimes mommy and daddy use cannabis. I know this is a little bit of a digression, but
No,
sometimes
you're
mommy
fine.
and daddy use cannabis. It's very important for your brain development that you don't use it as a child. They're still in elementary school, so who knows what kind of effect it's having on them now. But I want to be honest, I want to be straightforward, and I want them to, like, wait as long as possible. I really do believe that waiting until 21 is the safest thing and the healthiest thing. um, what was I saying? Oh, so personally, I used so I would use it kind of intermittently in my 20s, just as something fun to do. I kind of would I tended to prefer smoking a little bit. Using edibles is just, it was so easy to overdose on edibles.
Hmm.
And by overdose, I just mean get too high, not like something bad.
Not,
I'm sure most of your listeners know that, but just I always
right.
want to clarify.
Like
Um,
not properly dosing, right? Like eating way
yeah,
too
not
much
properly
and then
dosing. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, and with our edibles, actually, it was pretty easy to dose, but I think I preferred having I don't know, I preferred the uh, with smoking. There's a lot more variety. I think when you distill down to edibles, you can create a baseline, but you don't have as much variety in the entourage effect as you do with smoking. But so lately, as I've aged, my joints aren't doing as well as they used to. So I tend to use a lot on my knees, a lot of topicals on my knees. I tend to, I do get a lot of anxiety, and so I'll smoke a little bit just to kind of relax at the end of the day, if I'm having trouble sleeping. My wife has definitely increased the amount of kind of like CBN based edibles that she's been using, just because she's been having so much trouble sleeping, and she normally sleeps like a rock. Um, so, but everyone has that story, I guess, after
Right.
the pandemic of
Yeah.
just like, what is going on with the world? I
I,
need some way to deal.
we're all on edge. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
you talked about how the consumption rates of cannabis were comparable to alcohol during, that height of the lockdowns and stuff. And, even in my neighborhood, it was true. I think Joe Rogan even talked about it in his podcast, where you'd walk in the neighborhood and just hear the clinkling of the bottles and stuff in people's recycling bins,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's including ours too. I'm not taking ourselves out of it. It was a weird, rough time, so
Yeah.
I get that people are looking to things like, cannabis, specifically CBN, to kind of help with sleep aid and other things.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So Zachary, let's switch gears and talk to us about Ganja Goddess. So, what are you all about? How are you helping your consumers? What are your brands? Yeah.
So, yeah, right now we've obviously transitioned over to the recreational market in California. And we cover over 95% of the population of California. There are a couple areas, especially like uh, around federal land, we just can't go into right now. But so we covered the entire state with next day delivery, and we really tried to make it easy to order from us, a really seamless process. We have a really great customer service team that are very good at answering your questions and helping to guide people through, both who are very experienced with cannabis, but also people who are kind of new to it. And we've always wanted to be open about that, encourage people to talk to us if they have questions. Um, we try to make it a really discreet delivery, uh, and yeah, it's been going wonderfully. I think we've hit a nerve with our customers in the sense of like they really appreciate our service. We're able to reach areas that just don't have other like local either delivery or storefronts available. Um, so there are a lot of areas. The way that California has legalized, and this is a little bit unfortunate, I don't think we thought it would be as much of a problem as it is, but it's a two-tier licensing system. The state licenses, but then each municipality comes up with its own rules and licensing program. And it's just created such a problem. Over 50% of the state doesn't have access to retail cannabis. Um, they have to, if they wanted to, they'd have to drive like more than 40 miles to get
Right.
something. And it's ridiculous. Uh, it's ridiculous how many communities the leaders there have just been like, even though people want this, I'm uncomfortable, so I'm just going to vote no or vote to ban. And we've also really tried to, as I mentioned before, capture that idea of like of wellness, of like holistic health, um, and holistic living, and making cannabis a part of your healthy routine, a part of your kind of like just being happy, because it makes you happy.
Right. You talked about the double license problem, right, in California, and
Hmm.
how that's problematic and challenging for operators. So, like, I always kind of ask this question to guests: if you had a magic wand, right, and it was Zachary's perfect world, like, what would legislation and regulation look like from your perspective, operating a delivery services cannabis company?
Oh man, there's a lot that I would change. It's funny because I've gotten used to a lot of the compliance, despite its costs and its burden. And I always, at the beginning of this fight, I became pretty involved in both local licensing and the state level legislation and regulatory rulemaking process, because I really wanted to make sure that delivery had a space that had reasonable rules. But the most common thing I felt was just like, legislators, they treat cannabis like it's nuclear waste or something that's, going to kill everyone and destroy neighborhoods and destroy communities. And it's just, I get that they want to be cautious and slow with its rollout, but it is not dangerous.
Is
It's just
is
not dangerous.
so you being in the space for so long, is that really what you think, that they think like that, they think that they're so uneducated about it that they think it's super harmful, or is it, which I'm kind of lean more toward, that they see it as a threat to existing legacy industries?
I don't actually believe that the legacy industries are that against it. I mean, if you look at who was like funding the opposition mostly, it's like Sheldon Adelson. And that was a personal belief. I believe, and I don't quote me on this, but he had a son, I believe, that OD'd or had a lot of problems with drug use in general. And Adelson believed that cannabis was a gateway drug. Now we know that cannabis is not a gateway drug. The whole concept of gateway drugs is ridiculous. And if anything, the gateway drugs are just something that has been enforced because of the way that we've, as a society, said that cannabis and so many other drugs are bad inherently. And the moment you discover that they're not, you're like, well, what else isn't bad that we've been saying is bad? But regardless, I just it is true. It is true that there are different people and there are different organizations that have interests and want to have say in how cannabis is regulated. But honestly, the amount of misunderstanding and education that has had to happen of our legislators, it has really made me start to believe that a lot of they just don't understand.
Right.
And yeah, so I don't
It's
know.
almost no, it's almost, I agree with you. It's almost like it's twofold though also, right? Because you've got all these testimonials of people who have used the plant for various ailments and they see the effects. So you got those testimonial stories. The research isn't quite there, right? Due to the
Yeah,
federal regulation. But then you have two entities, two bodies that are super, super influential and powerful, right? You have the policymakers at the state, local, and federal level, but then you also have the healthcare side, right? Like the endocannabinoid system is not even taught in our healthcare system at all, right? So there is so much education, I feel like, in catch up that we
yeah,
need to do to the people that actually are invoking change, right?
yeah.
Like and it's going to be a scary time, I think, as public support keeps to push this momentum and they do decide to act on it, that they're going to make misinformed, decisions.
Yeah,
um
yeah. And so to go back to the magic wand, I guess I I I would I'd change it so that every kind of like person who came to their local city council and thought that cannabis was going to ruin their neighborhood, every legislator and city council person and governor, etc., I wish every single one of them had a rich history of using cannabis. And I think that alone would just change everything.
yeah,
Um,
I had a conversation with Andrew D'Angelo, and he's like, everybody in the House and the Senate needs to smoke at least one joint before they meet, and it'd be a whole different ball game. Everybody'd be kind to each other. They'd actually listen to each other and not scream and yell.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think there's some
definitely.
truth to that. It sounds ridiculous, but I think that anybody who knows the plant, that makes sense. We should try
Yeah.
that. So, well, it looks positive, right? Because we've got us of the blue wave, and we've got the Senate now that's talking about reform, and we're talking even about potential legalization, full blown legalization. So, with that momentum on the political scale happening, how do you feel if everything kind of goes through? How is that going to affect the current landscape in California? Will it help address some of these challenges and pain points, or will those pain points and challenges need to be addressed at the state and local level?
It's so a lot of the laws that were passed on the state and local level were passed with an eye towards the federal government. A lot of these legislators and regulators, they were like, look, we can have like really scary Department of Justice who decides that like everything's wrong, and maybe they're even going to start like trying to arrest the uh, people who are doing the licensing, the people who are regulating the industry, and like prosecute them. So we need to do everything we can to cover ourselves. And so they made rules that are just, that are a little bit silly.
Yeah.
um,
You're not the
and
first that
so,
said that, Zachary. I mean, a lot of guests out of California are preaching this, so you're not the
yeah.
only one.
So, I think with federal legalization, it would really, and we've been fighting them. We've been saying, you know, this thing or that thing, and there's just so many. And I have to be, the regular, they have tried. They have really tried to listen to the industry, but they have a lot of different, uh, entities and beliefs pulling them in different directions. But some of them, I really feel like we'd have so much more weight to come in and say, like, okay, federal government has legalized it now, can we be like intelligent about this? Can we treat this on the same level as we do like alcohol? Can we believe that we're not all criminals, that we're not transporting nuclear waste, that we don't need the level of security that you'd find on a military base or something?
Right.
So yeah.
Right.
So it would definitely be nice. And also, California, the entire, West Coast, I think has a lot of good growers. There's been a lot of good cannabis coming out of the West Coast, whether it's Washington, Oregon, or California.
No
And
doubt. Yeah.
to be able to transport that to other states, you have customers in other states that I know want, the Cali weed, or, the Pacific Northwest weed or whatever. And just to be able to have that option would be amazing. I definitely don't know if it will happen as fast as I'm hoping. But that's also from like over a decade of thinking that it would happen faster than it does.
Right.
So
It's
yeah.
like you guys who have been in the game for a while. It's like you'll just kind of wait to let it play out, right? Because you've been on pins and needles for so long, hoping for reform, and now it's happening so fast. It seems like that you just kind
It's
of
all
wait, let it play out.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
always hard for me to really judge timelines because, there are things that I thought would happen immediately that take forever. And then there are things that I thought would take forever that are just like, 3 months later, we suddenly have it. And I'm like, how did that happen? What? And that's, not just in cannabis policy. I think there are a lot of like fits and starts to a lot of the changes and evolutions that we have in law and as a society. Um, and so, I'm obviously hopeful. I think federal reform for cannabis really needs to take into account the history of outlawing it and how we're going to kind of compensate the individuals and communities that have been repressed by
Mm-hmm.
our cannabis laws. Um, and I think it's just such a huge institution that needs to be unraveled, what we've created to repress people and the usage of this drug and the sales of this drug. Um, but I'm really hopeful that there are some very simple reforms that the federal government could pass with very little debate on, because we've been talking about it for so long, like getting rid of the problems with 280E and the tax laws, allowing us banking. So at least in the states that have legalized, it becomes something that it's not as much of a problem in those states.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah. When you gave that example of like, whoa, like there's times where things just happen and it's like, when did that happen? Like 2 or 3 months later. And let's hope that, it's one of those moments for banking and for that provision 280E, because
yeah.
man, what a hindrance on operators,
It is.
in the
It's
industry.
stunning because and in so many ways, it forces us to be less safe and less secure with how we operate. Like businesses should not be moving around tons of cash, and that's not even to say like a cannabis business doesn't have to be huge to just deal with tons of cash. It's just a nature of any sort of retail operation, or really any sort of operation where you're just going to have a lot of money moving back and forth. And it's just so dangerous to not be able to like use traditional banking.
Right. Well, maybe with all these trends that we're seeing of people adding Bitcoin to their balance sheet, we'll just, supersede cash and go straight to Bitcoin, Who knows?
Yeah, maybe.
Well, hey, Zachary, as we wrap up, what is Ganja Goddess up to in 2021 and beyond?
Well, right now we're actually expanding quite a. I mean, we did a lot of expansion during 2020 just to kind of meet demand, but we're trying to kind of get ahead of it a little bit. We're raising some money. This is the first time we've really raised money, which is a little bit scary for me. We've always kind of bootstrapped it and put our funds back into the business, but so we're really trying to expand. We're trying to expand like the platform that we use. We have a custom e-commerce platform that we've developed, and we really want to make it, as usable and easy for everyone. We really want to expand how we do kind of community outreach, how we reach different communities because we want to bring this to the world. We want every single person to try cannabis because not everyone's going to like it, but it's not what we've been saying as a society for the past, 80 years. And it really can change lives, and it's really fun. And we think people should try it and they'd enjoy it. So we want to find ways to kind of like bring everyone into the cannabis world, I guess.
Love it. I'm with you on that mission. Let's do it, man. I'm all in. Perfect. Where can people find y'all's website and
Oh yeah.
social media?
So goddessdelivers.com or ganjagoddess.com is our website. If you're in California, you probably can order from us. You just type in your zip code and you place an order, and we'd love to get it to you. We have a really wonderful selection that's curated. The team that curates it, I mean, most everyone tries everything that we have, but the team that curates it they have a lot of belief and faith in what they're doing and what we list on the website. And our social media fun. I mean, this is a big conversation, but we just lost our Instagram account. And so I think it's probably easiest to follow us on Twitter at this point. But it's a big problem in the industry. Social media thinks that we're a really big sin that shouldn't have any presence on social media. So unfortunately, it's difficult to like be consistent in our social media, but you can look us up just by searching Ganja Goddess.
Tell me about it. I own and operate my own social media marketing agency, and it is a headache, man. It's crazy until we get FDA consumer oversight for hemp or even that federal regulation, reform. It's going to be a pain. So
my marketing director she gets so demoralized because she'll spend so much time helping to build it up, and then it just like gets taken away and she has to start from the beginning, and so
I know. Well, hey, we're all just fighting through the fight. It's not a matter if, it's a matter of when things are going to change it for the better. So we just gotta ride the wave.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, well, thanks for your time, Zachary, and look forward to following all y'all's progress. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you so much as well, Kevin.
Yes, and thank you all for listening. Bye.